20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Tech in 20. We are the broadcast that is covering topics that are happening in the world of digital media, social media, interactive media, and all types of cool technology. So if it's happening in the media and the tech world, folks, we are looking at talking about that. And you are joining us tonight for the December 6th, 2011 episode. And if you're looking for a place to catch up with our entire archive of past broadcasts, point your browser to techin20.com. There you'll find the interviews, you'll find the discussions, you'll find the panels. I highly encourage you to check them out. Really great topics of discussion, and you know what? We're coming up on 2012, and we're going to have some further discussions, great interviews, and more panels. That I can guarantee. As always, tonight we are your hosts. My name is Louis Sandoval.
And my name is Jennifer Navarrete, and this week we're going to talk about branding and marketing in the modern age. We're going to talk a little bit more than that, but I mean, in essence, marketing, if you think, I don't know about you, Louis, but when I think about marketing like back in the day, I'm thinking of a guy, hawking his wares, trying to convince people to buy what he has because it's amazing, it's wonderful, it will cure everything, it's, just this wonderful thing, and that's kind of like the basics of going like town to town to kind of sell your wares. And then we fast forward to how things are nowadays, and not to say that we aren't still maybe hawking our wares, but it's a completely different experience.
You're definitely right about that, Jennifer. The way we market and brand ourselves nowadays is very different from that door-to-door salesman. I think there is a very, very, very small percentage of businesses that may still function in that capacity, and maybe it's working for them. But, in the grand scheme of things, we're seeing a lot of businesses transition the way they reach out to people, the way they establish themselves, the way they build their foundation of not only supporters but also internal communications. And a lot of this has really kind of been the culmination of the development of so many online and digital tools. But on top of that, it also has to do a lot with the societal shift in the way that we communicate, going from a very one-to-many communication where now there's not just so much that communication as much as it is a dialogue. It's not so much the pitching and the preaching and the soapbox mentality. It's more of a dialogue, and I think a lot of companies that have embraced this dialogue mentality with their supporters, with their customers, with their clients, have really seen a rise. Not just in the types of clients that they get, but I mean ultimately for any business, profits. Profits matter, and when you can establish that level of trust, when you can establish that level of understanding, that really is what can propagate a very sound relationship, and working hand in hand, whether it's with the customers or clients, you can see growth, very positive growth, and ultimately, again, both sides create a win-win situation.
Louis, you mentioned something, and I think it's something that a lot of companies still have a big fear factor about, and you mentioned that it's a dialogue. Now, I've encountered companies and groups that just don't feel like they're ready for that dialogue. They honestly don't have the manpower or don't really understand how that two-way conversation could work. And so for them, considering marketing as being something that's not just them doing push, but something that is a two-way or a push and a pull is just such a foreign concept. And I'm just curious, I know what I tell folks, but I'm curious maybe what are some of the kind of lines or things that you say to kind of encourage companies to be more open-minded about that?
Well, I think what it comes down to is understanding first and foremost. I think a lot of the fear comes from that lack of. And it really does help to do a couple of things from my experience. One, you have to show them some practical use. I think that's really what it comes down to. It's great that a lot of these networks have bells and whistles and all kinds of things that can really, catapult a company into the stratosphere. But the bottom line is, what's the practical purpose? What are we going to be doing with it? I got to say, another really big win is when you start showing them what their competitors are doing. Nothing gets a business motivated and moving in the right direction like showing what their competition is doing. It's not so much that you want to keep up with the Joneses, because their particular approach to the way they reach their individual customer base or clients might be very different from the way their competition is doing it. I think it's important to establish your voice and personality within the social space, but nothing gets them motivated than seeing that their competition is doing some type of outreach and also showing a level of success. I think the understanding the practical purposes, showing them what the competition is doing, and then outlining a strategy. One of the key things that I think a lot of people tend to miss is that it's great to create content. You can do all the videos, you can do all the blog posts, you can do all the tweeting, you can do all the plus Ks and the plus ones that you want. But if nobody is there to see what you're doing, to comment on what you're doing, to engage with what you're doing, you're pretty much talking to yourself. And so a very practical strategy that not only has you as a very active participant in other people's comments, in other people's blog posts, in other people's arena, you also have to understand that with that type of involvement, there's going to be a lot of return. And that kind of outlines that, again, that dialogue. So those 3 points, I think, are very, very important when you start trying to get people to understand why it's so vital. I mean, social media, yeah, it's a buzzword. It's probably been used over and over again to the point of beating the dead horse. And same thing with maybe the words like engagement and transparency. And I personally try to stay away from some of those words. I try to speak, to the company in a language that they understand. But ultimately, this medium is here to stay. Call it what you will. And so, again, I think it's very important for companies that haven't really jumped on board and haven't embraced it, learn the practical purposes, see what your competition is doing, and don't be afraid to engage in other people's arena. Hopefully that will attract attention to the stuff that you're doing.
I think you said it right, and I think maybe changing it from dialogue and push and pull and just having it be something that's having a conversation with your clients, having just something that a meeting, it's something so simple that we do anyway in our business, and all of a sudden when it becomes online, it seems a scary thing. And I will say, looking forward, I mean, I'm not sure if you encounter this, but I think a lot of times when we think about marketing, you're thinking, or folks are thinking that, okay, great, I'm already on Facebook. That's, I've got the social media thing down, and I'm totally got it covered. But there's some things that are very, very could be very important depending on the business. Once again, not everything fits everyone. But the couple of things that I think folks sometimes neglect to look at is the gaming factor and the mobile factor. Now, we all know apps are really important, but there's so much more to it than just apps, even though that's a great place to start. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts in relation to social, gaming, and mobile that companies, or perhaps you're encountering folks where they're like, yeah, we totally get it. You don't need to convince us. We're ready to buy into it.
Okay, so I kind of come from two schools of thought on here. In terms of the social gaming, I think that still has a long way to go for companies to really kind of understand how their business might fit into a social gaming environment. Understandably, there might be a lot of companies that don't fit into that space or really require out-of-the-box thinking. But that's still a relatively new concept. I've come across very few companies that are ready to jump into the social gaming aspect. With regards to mobile, it's funny. There's a lot of companies. I almost feel like mobile industry right now is a lot like the web industry was back in the mid to late 90s. Everybody wants to be in. Everybody wants to be in. But the one thing that I'm noticing is that nobody knows why they want to be in. And sometimes they want to be in for all the wrong reasons. When everybody wanted a website, what happened? It ended up becoming billboards. A lot of these sites were never updated, static. quite honestly, it was a way to have a presence, but it really wasn't a lot of value in having that presence. Nothing was ever really done with it aside from listing your services, maybe your resources, a contact number or an email address, maybe a small form, and that was pretty much the extent of a website. You know, we're starting to see the same things with mobile apps. I work for a mobile app company, and so I can actually attest to the fact that we get a lot of unusual requests, a lot of people not understanding what the mobile space really is and how they can fit into it. A lot of people just want their site mobilized, which is great. I think having a mobile website is almost a vital component nowadays when you build your website. But I think a mobile app is something that's very unique and should stand not necessarily 100% apart from your website, but provide a unique experience that nobody's going to get anywhere else, in turn provide some value. And so it's more than just having a mobile. I think mobile app is more than just having, a contact button. And maybe we'll put a list of our employees or directors or whatever. I mean, a mobile application really needs to provide some value. So, again, much like the websites of old, go in with a strategy. It's great that companies are moving into that space, but really try to find a way on how you as a company or you as a brand, as an individual, fit into this particular arena and really make it work for you.
Sound advice, and I think you're right. I think what we're hearing in the gaming sector, and like you said, it has a long way to go. I agree with you. I'm a big fan of it just because I've seen some of the groups out there, some of the corporations, some of the businesses, they're doing it successfully, but it is still somewhat of a hit and miss because you also hear folks trying to do gaming and it doesn't really work out.